when a racist border agent decided to harass and search a black man at the airport. No one expected the man to pull out his diplomatic credentials, revealing he was a U.S. ambassador to a powerful ally nation. But the real shock came when the agent's superiors arrived, and justice started unfolding in ways no one saw coming. The fluorescent lights of Dulles International Airport buzzed overhead like a swarm of angry bees, casting a harsh glow on the weary travelers shuffling through customs. It was late evening, the kind where jet lag clung to everyone like a second skin. Marcus Hale stepped off the flight from Nairobi, his leather briefcase in one hand and a small carry-on in the other. He was dressed simply, a crisp button-down shirt, slacks, and loafers, nothing flashy, but his posture spoke of quiet authority. At 52, Marcus had the build of someone who still ran marathons, his salt and pepper beard trimmed neatly. He looked like any other businessman returning home, but the weight in his chest was heavier than his luggage. This trip had been grueling, negotiating trade deals that could lift thousands out of poverty in East Africa. As U.S. ambassador to Kenya, he carried the hopes of two nations on his shoulders. Marcus joined the customs line, his mind drifting to his wife, Elena, waiting at home in Virginia with their two daughters. He'd promised him a family dinner. No work talk, just stories from the savannah. The line moved slowly, the air thick with the scent of coffee from a nearby kiosk and the murmur of conversations in a dozen languages. Ahead, border agents scanned passports with mechanical efficiency. Marcus pulled out his diplomatic passport, the deep blue cover embossed with gold, a symbol of his status that he'd earned through decades of service, from Peace Corps volunteer to rising star in the State Department. Then he reached Agent Harlan Reed. Reed was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered with a buzz cut and a perpetual scowl, his uniform starched but his eyes sharp with suspicion. He glanced at Marcus, then at the passport, his lips curling slightly. "Step aside." Reed barked, not even opening the document fully. Marcus raised an eyebrow, but complied, moving to a secondary inspection area. He'd traveled the world, faced down corrupt officials in foreign lands, but this home soil still stung. He knew the look, the one that reduced him to a stereotype before he could speak. Reed sauntered over, snapping on latex gloves with exaggerated slowness. "Where you coming from?" he asked, his tone laced with accusation. "Kenya," Marcus replied evenly, handing over his passport again. "Business trip." Reed flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing at the stamps from African nations. "Business, huh? What kind?" "Diplomatic," Marcus said, his voice steady. He didn't elaborate. He shouldn't have to. Reed snorted. "Yeah, right. Empty your pockets. And open that briefcase." The command was sharp, unnecessary for a routine check. Nearby, travelers glanced over, sensing the tension. A young couple whispered, and an elderly woman shook her head. Marcus felt a familiar ache, the one from his youth in Chicago, where cops had pulled him over for looking suspicious in his own neighborhood. But he breathed deeply, reminding himself, dignity first. He placed his wallet, phone, and keys on the table, then unlocked his briefcase. Inside were folders of classified documents, a laptop, and a small Kenyan artifact, a carved wooden lion, a gift from a village elder. Reed rifled through it all, scattering papers carelessly. "What's this?" he demanded, holding up the lion like it was contraband. "A souvenir," Marcus said calmly. "Cultural exchange." Reed's face twisted. "Looks suspicious. You smuggling something? We get a lot of businessmen, like you trying to sneak in ivory or worse." The implication hung heavy, racial, unfounded. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise. Instead, his mind flashed back to a memory. 1998, fresh out of college, volunteering in Senegal. A local chief had taught him, strength isn't in the roar, it's in the stand. He'd carried that lesson through embassy bombings, hostage crises, and now this petty power play. "Agent, I assure you, everything is in order," Marcus said firmly. "Check my passport." Reed ignored him, calling over another agent, a younger man who shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. "Pat him down," Reed ordered. The search was invasive, Reed's hands pressing harder than necessary, as if daring Marcus to react. Travelers murmured louder now. A woman pulled out her phone, perhaps recording. Reed noticed and snarled, "Mind your business, folks. This is security." Marcus stood still, his heart pounding not from fear, but from the injustice boiling inside. How many black men had faced this exact humiliation at borders, airports, streets? He thought of his daughters. One in college studying international relations, the other in high school dreaming of diplomacy. What world was he leaving them if even an ambassador wasn't safe from bias? Finally, Reed stepped back, smirking. "You're clean, for now, but I'm holding this briefcase for further inspection. Could be hours. Sit tight." Marcus met his gaze. "That won't be necessary." He reached into his inner pocket slowly, pulling out his official credentials, a laminated card with the U.S. Department of State seal. "I'm Ambassador Marcus Hale, assigned to Kenya. These documents are classified. Detain them, and you'll violate diplomatic protocol." Reed's smirk faltered, his face paling as he snatched the card. "This some fake? Anyone can print these." "Call your supervisor," Marcus suggested, his tone like steel wrapped in velvet. Or, better yet, the State Department hotline listed there. The younger agent peered over, eyes widening. "Harlan, that looks real." Reed hesitated, then radioed in, his voice gruff. Minutes ticked by, the area growing tense. Travelers lingered, sensing drama. Marcus stood composed, but inside he prepared for the fallout. Not just for himself, but for the change this could spark. Suddenly, two suited officials burst through a side door, a senior CBP director and a State Department liaison. The director's face was thunderous. "Agent Reed, stand down. This is Ambassador Hale, verified. What the hell is going on?" Reed stammered. "I was just routine check." He looked. "Save it," the director snapped. "You've crossed a line." Turning to Marcus, he apologized profusely. "Sir, this is unacceptable. We'll handle it." Marcus nodded, gathering his things. "It's not just about me. This happens too often to travelers, immigrants, citizens who don't look the part. Use this as a teachable moment." As Reed was led away, his badge in question, Marcus walked toward the exit. But as he reached the doors, his phone buzzed. An urgent call from the Secretary of State. "Ambassador, we've got a situation." "That agent? He's not alone. There's a pattern here, and it goes higher." The airport faded behind him, but the fight was just beginning. What Marcus uncovered next would shake the agency to its core. The Dulles International Airport Customs Hall was a distant hum now. But for Ambassador Marcus Hale, the echo of Agent Harlan Reed's smug voice lingered like a bad aftertaste. Marcus stepped into Virginia night, the cool air brushing against his face as he answered the urgent call from the Secretary of State. Her voice was sharp, clipped with urgency. "Marcus, this isn't just about Reed. We've got reports, multiple complaints about targeted searches at Dulles. It's systemic. I need you to lead a task force. Can you handle it?" Marcus gripped his phone tighter, his briefcase heavy with classified documents. He'd faced war zones, but this fight, on home soil, against entrenched bias, felt personal. "I'm in," he said, knowing this was only the beginning. The next morning, Marcus sat in his Alexandria home office, the walls lined with photos of his diplomatic postings, shaking hands with African leaders, speaking at the UN, his daughter's graduation caps pinned above his desk. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, catching the carved wooden line from Kenya on his desk. A reminder of why he fought. His laptop screen glowed with emails from the State Department, detailing a dozen complaints against Customs and Border Protection, CBP, at Dulles. Black travelers, Latino families, Muslim women, all targeted for random searches, their stories eerily similar to his own. Marcus's jaw tightened. He remembered his father, a postal worker in Chicago, coming home exhausted from random stops. This wasn't new. It was generational. He called his wife, Elena, into the room. She leaned against the doorframe, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a night shift. "You sure about this, Marcus? You're wading into a snake pit." He met her eyes, steady. "If I don't, who will? Our girls deserve better than this." Elena nodded, her silence a quiet endorsement. She'd seen him navigate crises before, Haiti, Somalia, but this was different. This was home. By noon, Marcus was in a secure conference room at the State Department, facing 3 officials: the CBP Deputy Commissioner, a Justice Department investigator, and a civil rights lawyer named Aisha Khan. Aisha, sharp-eyed and direct, slid a folder across the table. Ambassador Hale, these are internal reports. Reed's not an outlier. His unit's been flagged for disproportionate searches of minorities. 70% of their random stops target non-white travelers. Marcus flipped through the data, his diplomat's calm masking the fire inside. And no one acted on this, he asked. The deputy commissioner shifted uncomfortably. We discipline individuals, but resources are tight. Marcus's gaze hardened. Resources aren't the issue. Courage is. He thought back to Nairobi, negotiating with warlords who were behind protocol. Bias, like corruption, thrived in silence. As a young diplomat, he'd learned to outmaneuver gatekeepers by building coalitions. Now he'd do the same. We need a full audit, Marcus said. Training records, search logs, body cam footage. And I want community input, real voices, not just bureaucrats. Aisha nodded, jotting notes. The deputy commissioner hesitated, but agreed. Marcus knew why. His ambassadorial clout carried weight, and the secretary's backing made pushback risky. That afternoon, Marcus visited Dulles again, this time with Aisha and a CBP liaison named Torres, a younger officer who seemed uneasy but cooperative. They walked through the customs area, where agents glanced nervously. Marcus's presence, tall, composed, now in a tailored suit with his diplomatic pin, shifted the air. He wasn't just a traveler anymore. He was a force. Torres showed him the screening protocols, but Marcus's eyes caught on a training manual, its pages dog-eared. This is outdated, he said, pointing to a section on profiling indicators that leaned heavily on stereotypes. Torres stammered. It's being revised. Marcus didn't blink. Revised faster. Back at his hotel, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his daughter, Maya, the college student. Dad, saw your name in a tweet about Dulles. People are talking. You're trending. He opened X and found a video clip, grainy, from a traveler's phone, showing Reed's search yesterday. The caption read, Ambassador humiliated at airport. Is this America? Comments poured in, some praising Marcus's calm, others raging at CBP. One post caught his eye. An anonymous whistleblower claiming Reed's supervisor, a high-ranking official, encouraged tough searches to deter threats. Marcus's pulse quickened. This wasn't just one rogue agent. It went higher. He met Aisha at a coffee shop the next day, away from prying eyes. She slid him a USB drive. Off the record, she whispered. Audio from a CBP meeting. Reed's boss, Director Vaughn, brags about keeping certain types in line. It's damning. Marcus pocketed the drive, his mind flashing to 2003, when he'd exposed a corrupt embassy official in Ghana. Back then, he'd learned evidence was power, but only if used strategically. We need more, he told Aisha. Witnesses, not just audio. She nodded. I've got a lead, an agent who's willing to talk, but he's scared. That night, Marcus met the whistleblower, Agent Carter, in a dimly lit park. Carter, a nervous man in his 30s, fidgeted with his jacket. Vaughn's untouchable, he said. He's got friends in high places, senators even. Marcus leaned forward. No one's untouchable when the truth comes out. Will you testify? Carter hesitated, then nodded. Marcus felt the weight of the moment. This was bigger than Reed, bigger than Dulles. It was about dismantling a culture that let bias fester. The task force convened the next morning, now with Carter's testimony and the audio. The deputy commissioner's face paled as the recording played. Vaughn's voice smug, saying, Profile smart, but don't get caught. Marcus stood, his voice steady but piercing. This ends now. I'm recommending a DOJ investigation into Vaughn and his chain of command. And I want mandatory retraining. Focus on bias, not just protocol. The room was silent, but Aisha's eyes gleamed with resolve. The fight was gaining momentum. As Marcus left the meeting, his phone rang again. It was Elena, her voice tight. "Marcus, check the news. Vaughn's team is fighting back, leaking lies about you." He turned on his tablet, seeing headlines. "Ambassador Hale accused of overstepping authority." Anonymous sources claimed he'd fabricated complaints to push a woke agenda. Marcus's chest tightened, but he smiled grimly. He'd faced smear campaigns before. This wasn't the end. It was a sign he was getting close. The Virginia sky was heavy with clouds as Ambassador Marcus Hale stepped into the Department of Justice's Washington office, the weight of the past week pressing against his chest like a stone. The smear campaign against him had escalated. Headlines accusing him of overreach and stirring division splashed across news sites, fueled by anonymous leaks from Director Vaughn's allies. But Marcus had been in tougher fights, from negotiating peace in war-torn regions to surviving a bombing in Nairobi. This was personal, a battle for the soul of a system that had failed too many. As he entered the DOJ conference room, he carried Agent Carter's testimony, Aisha Khan's legal analysis, and a fire that no smear could extinguish. Today, the truth would speak. The room was sterile, all glass and steel, with a long table where the CBP Deputy Commissioner, DOJ investigator, and Aisha waited. A new face joined them. Senator Elaine Carver, a longtime advocate for civil rights, her silver hair pulled back, eyes sharp with purpose. Marcus had met her years ago at a diplomatic summit. Her presence now signaled this was no ordinary meeting. The deputy commissioner, visibly tense, opened a laptop. "Ambassador Hale, we've reviewed. The evidence, Carter's testimony, the audio, search logs. It's substantial." Marcus nodded, his face unreadable. Substantial enough to act? Aisha slid a report across the table. Vaughn's unit conducted 82% of their searches on minorities last year, despite only 30% of travelers being non-white. The audio confirms he encouraged profiling. We've got 3 more agents willing to corroborate Carter's account. Marcus's mind flashed to his own encounter with Agent Reed. The smugness, the gloves snapping, the assumption that a black man in a suit was a threat. He thought of his daughters, Maya and Lila, who'd texted him last night. "Dad, keep fighting. We're proud." Their words anchored him. Senator Carver leaned forward. "Marcus, this goes beyond Dulles. We're talking systemic bias across CBP hubs. I'm pushing for a Senate hearing, but we need your voice to make it undeniable." Marcus met her gaze. "I'm not here for headlines, Senator. I'm here for change." She nodded, a faint smile breaking her stern demeanor. "Then let's make it happen." The meeting stretched into hours, dissecting Vaughn's influence. Carter's testimony revealed a culture of fear. Agents pressured to meet security quotas that conveniently targeted black and brown travelers. Marcus proposed a 3-pronged plan: immediate suspension of Vaughn and his inner circle, mandatory anti-bias training with community oversight, and a public report to restore trust. The deputy commissioner hesitated. Vaughn's political connections ran deep. But Senator Carver's presence tipped the scales. "Do it," she said, her voice like iron, "or I'll make sure the Senate does." That evening, Marcus sat at his hotel, the TV muted as news channels debated his controversial task force. A knock at the door startled him. It was Agent Carter, looking less nervous now, his shoulders squared. "Ambassador, I just testified to the DOJ panel. They're moving on Vaughn, suspension pending investigation." Marcus exhaled, a rare moment of relief. "You did the right thing, Carter." The younger man nodded. "I was scared, but watching you at the airport, standing calm while Reed pushed you, that's why I spoke up." Marcus clasped his shoulder. Courage isn't loud. It's steady. The next morning, Marcus stood outside the DOJ building, facing a swarm of reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "Ambassador Hale, are you targeting CBP to push a personal agenda?" one shouted. Marcus's voice was calm, cutting through the noise. "This isn't about me. It's about every traveler who's been profiled, every citizen who deserves fairness. I'm not tearing down CBP. I'm holding it to its own standards." The crowd quieted, some nodding. A young black reporter raised her hand. "What's next, sir?" Marcus paused, thinking of his daughters, accountability, and a system that serves everyone. By noon, news broke. Vaughn was suspended, his email subpoenaed. The DOJ announced a nationwide CBP audit, with Marcus appointed to oversee its implementation. At home, Elena greeted him with a hug, her eyes glistening. "You stirred the pot, love." Marcus chuckled. "Had to. For Maya, Lila, and everyone else." Lila ran in, waving her phone. "Dad, your speech is viral. Look at these comments." Posts on X praise her composure, with hashtag #JusticeAtDulles trending. One user wrote, "Ambassador Hale showed us what dignity looks like." But as Marcus sat with his family that night, a new email arrived from Senator Carver. "We've uncovered something bigger. Vaughn's ties to a private security firm influencing CBP policy. We need you in a closed Senate session tomorrow." Marcus's heart sank. The fight wasn't over. It was escalating, and the stakes were higher than ever. The Senate hearing room was a fortress of oak and marble, its high ceiling amplifying every whisper. Ambassador Marcus Hale sat at the witness table, his diplomatic pin glinting under the harsh lights. Across from him, Senator Elaine Carver chaired the closed session, her gaze steady as she faced a panel of lawmakers, DOJ officials, and a nervous CBP deputy commissioner. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles before a storm breaks. Marcus's briefcase held the latest bombshell, evidence linking Director Vaughn to a private security firm, Sentinel Solutions that had lobbied for aggressive CBP profiling policies in exchange for lucrative contracts. This wasn't just about one rogue agent anymore. It was about a machine profiting off prejudice. Marcus's mind drifted to his first diplomatic post in Ghana, 1998, where he'd uncovered a smuggling ring tied to embassy staff. Back then, he'd learned that corruption festers when power goes unchecked. Now, at 52, he saw the same pattern in Vaughn's scheme. Senator Carver opened the session, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Ambassador Hale, your findings at Dulles have exposed a systemic issue. What have you uncovered about Sentinel Solutions?" Marcus leaned forward, his tone calm but unyielding. "Emails show Vaughn received payments from Sentinel to push their enhanced security protocols, code for targeting minorities. It's not just bias, it's a business model." The room stirred. A senator from the opposition party, known for defending CBP, shifted uncomfortably. "These are serious allegations, Ambassador. Do you have proof?" Marcus slid a folder across the table, his eyes locked on the senator. Bank records, meeting logs, and whistleblower testimony from 3 agents, including Agent Carter. Sentinel CEO met Vaughn monthly, promising bonuses for higher arrest quotas. Black and brown travelers were the collateral. The deputy commissioner's face paled, but he stayed silent. Aisha Khan, the civil rights lawyer, stood to present. Her voice was razor-sharp. Sentinel's software flagged high risk, travelers based on race-coded data, names, accents, travel patterns. Vaughn's team used it to justify 80% of their searches targeting non-white passengers. Marcus thought of his own encounter with Agent Reed, the invasive pat-down, the smug accusation about smuggling. His daughter's faces flashed in his mind. This fight was for them, for every traveler who'd been dehumanized. Senator Carver turned to Marcus. "What do you recommend?" He didn't hesitate. Fire Vaughn and his accomplices. Ban Sentinel's contracts with CBP. Implement mandatory anti-bias training with community oversight, not just lip service. And release a public report. Transparency rebuilds trust. The opposition senator scoffed. "That's a witch hunt. You'll cripple border security." Marcus met his gaze. Security built on prejudice isn't security. It's oppression. Fix the system or it'll keep breaking trust. The hearing stretched into hours, with heated debates over policy and accountability. Marcus's composure never wavered, his voice a steady anchor. He recalled a lesson from his Peace Corps days in Senegal. Change moves slowly, but it starts with one voice. His was that voice now. By the session's end, Carver announced a unanimous vote. Vaughn would face criminal charges for corruption. Sentinel's contracts were suspended, and Marcus's task force would oversee a nationwide CBP reform. Days later, Marcus stood at a press conference outside the Capitol. flanked by Isha and Carter. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. "Ambassador Hale, how does it feel to take down a corrupt system?" a young journalist asked. Marcus paused, thinking of his wife, Elena, waiting at home with a proud smile. This isn't about taking down. It's about building up a system that serves everyone, not just a few. The crowd erupted in applause, but Marcus's eyes were on a black family nearby, their toddler waving a tiny flag. He nodded to them, a silent promise kept. Back home, Marcus sat with his daughters, Maya and Lila, at the dinner table. Lila grinned. "Dad, you're a hero on X." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. Not a hero, just a man who stood his ground. Maya, the aspiring diplomat, squeezed his hand. "You showed us how to fight without losing yourself." Elena raised her glass. "To dignity." They clinked glasses, the warmth of family grounding him after the storm. The reforms rolled out over months. New training community boards, and a DOJ hotline for traveler complaints. Marcus returned to Kenya, but his work at Dulles left a legacy. CBP's bias incidents dropped 40% within a year. Agent Reed, retrained and demoted, wrote Marcus an apology, which he accepted but didn't dwell on. The real victory was in the system's shift, in the travelers who now pass through Dulles without fear. Prejudice builds walls, but dignity tears them down. True strength lies not in shouting, but in standing firm for what's right. If this story inspired you, subscribe and share it. Join our community to keep justice alive, one story, one change at a time.